Good evening, everyone. So today I'm here to talk to you about the effects of the internet, and in particular social media, on our generation. How it's shaped our generation in more ways than we realize. So let's begin with a quick question. How many of you check your phone first thing in the morning when you wake up? Yeah? So almost all of us. For a majority of us, the first thing that we do every single morning after waking up is that we check our phones. And for a lot of us, the last thing that we do before sleeping at night is also to check our phones. In fact, a survey showed that 77% of the people between the ages of 18 and 24 reach out for their phones whenever they have any free time. And I'm definitely one of them. Now, I thought, what's the big deal? I mean, yeah, I use my phone whenever I have time. How harmful can it be? Maybe I spend a total of around 35, 40, 50 minutes on it. Well, just to check, I installed an app last week which tracks my usage of the phone. And the results were quite frankly astounding. Here, take a look. I spent an hour on Chrome, browsing the web, spent an hour on WhatsApp, 55 minutes on Snapchat, and 25 minutes on Instagram in one day. So a total of roughly 3.5 hours spent in just one day. Those little tidbits of time when we think we have free time and we're using our phones, they can actually add up to a pretty big number. And the results were similar when I asked my friends to do a similar test. We don't even realize what a big chunk of our day we spend on our phones. Now, how is this relevant? Why am I even talking about this? Well, it's because we've noticed a few interesting phenomena associated with smartphone usage. We've noticed that the average attention span of a human being has now gone down to 9 seconds. Just 9 seconds. And why is that? Well, some say it's linked to a phenomenon called instant gratification or instant happiness. And how does that happen? Well, there's a chemical called dopamine that's released in the brain whenever we experience this instant burst of happiness. When you get a text on your phone, it vibrates, get a notification, you get a bit excited, don't you? That momentary happiness. You're excited to see who it is, a little curious. That's dopamine being released in your brain. Dopamine, by the way, is the exact same chemical that's released when you drink alcohol, smoke a cigarette, take drugs, gamble. In other words, it shows highly addictive behavior. And we're seeing similar trends for smartphone usage. In fact, half of the 18 to 24-year-olds said that they checked their phones in the middle of the night. A third of UK adults checked their phones within 5 minutes of waking up. And this addiction of ours, you can see it everywhere. Brilliant graphic showing how we've evolved from apes to smartphone addicts. Another brilliant piece of art. What's the point of being afraid of a zombie apocalypse when you're already a zombie on your phone the entire time? And this addiction is no coincidence. It is no surprise. Because all of these apps, Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, they all have very carefully tailored algorithms which ensure that we are hooked to our phones. Why? Because each minute that you spend on these apps, these companies make big money through advertising. And you don't have to believe me. Hear it from Sean Parker. Sean Parker, one of the earliest investors of Facebook, said this in an interview. He said, Facebook's earliest mission was, how do we consume as much of your time and conscious attention as possible? He also said, we were exploiting the vulnerability of human psychology. Just think about that. Just let that sink in. All these apps, their purpose was never to connect you to one another. It was only to make you addicted and to make money off your backs. And we can see it happening everywhere, all around us. We're all addicted. We're all trapped. And this affects our mental health in ways that we just don't realize. A report showed that social media is linked with increased rates of anxiety, depression, and poor sleep. It also said that the rates of anxiety and depression have gone up by 70% in the recent past. 70%. So social media is linked to depression. And this is honestly not that surprising, because social media is great at providing that one thing that we all love: filters. And I don't mean just those pictures for our, filters for our pictures, not those cute Snapchat dog filters that we send each other. I mean something a little deeper. We filter our very lives before projecting them to the world. We show the happiest, the best versions of ourselves, sometimes fake versions of ourselves, out on social media. We don't put up stories of us cramming the day before the exam, having nervous breakdowns. We don't do that. We show to the world that we're having fun, we're having a great time. Our life is perfect, it's sorted. Now imagine, you're bored, sitting in your room, and you decide to open Snapchat, see what people are up to, and all you see are just stories of people having a great time, enjoying their lives with their boyfriend, their girlfriend, their friends, their family, having fun. And it might just be fake. It might not necessarily be true. It might be something like this: hashtag selfie, hashtag good life on the left, and on the right we see the reality. So when you're sitting alone in your room, watching other people's stories, watching them have fun, how will that make you feel? Even more alone, even more depressed. And we're seeing this happen. High rates of anxiety, high rates of depression, largely linked to social media. Sometimes, when all of this depression and anxiety builds up, in the most extreme of cases, and we've seen this happen, in the most extreme of cases, it can build up and cause irreversible harm, irreversible damage in the form of self-harm, sometimes even suicide cases. Just take a moment to think about it. Forget everything else for just a moment, and think about yourself and your relationship with these apps. Is it really any more different than being addicted to a drug? How does a drug addiction even begin? In our teenage years, in a person's teenage years, they're feeling a bit emotionally distressed, a little sad, which is completely normal, happens to all of us, and they're not getting enough support from people, so they try out a cigarette, a drug, maybe some alcohol, and then they like it. Why? Because dopamine is released. And then they start depending on it. It becomes an addiction. Now, whenever they're depressed or sad next, they don't turn to a person, they turn to the bottle, to drugs, to cigarettes. And we see a similar trend in our generation with regard to social media. Whenever we're distressed, we don't turn to people anymore. We don't turn to our friends, our families. We turn to our phone screens. And it's a cycle. You're a bit emotionally distressed, maybe a little bored. You check your phone, you feel better, start liking it, get addicted to it. And what does phone addiction do? Cause depression, even more depression. So it's a continuous, vicious cycle, and an extremely dangerous cycle that so many of us are prone to now. We just can't leave our phones alone for even one moment, can we? Take a ride on the bus, on the tube, everywhere you go, everyone will be busy on their phones. We don't have real-life conversations with each other anymore. We don't strike up a conversation with a stranger in a bus, unheard of, because we're all busy just chatting away, texting away, doing something or the other on our phones. And it's not just in this country, not just in the UK, not just in the Western world. I've seen the same thing happen in India as well, where I've lived for most of my life. It's becoming a global trend. You go out for a meal with your friends, they'll be busy on their phones half the time. This addiction of ours to our phones is driven by numbers. The number of likes, shares, comments, views that we get on our stories and on our posts. These numbers, they just keep buzzing in our head at such a fast speed. No wonder our attention spans are so low. No wonder our patience levels have just gone down. It's all way too fast. We're trapped in this virtual world. We care more about our Snapchat streaks than we do about actual face-to-face conversations with our friends. We've almost forgotten that there exists a real world outside this land of our smartphones. The next slide is true for so many of us. Wi-Fi went down for a few minutes, so I had to talk to my family. They seem like nice people. It's the reality for so many of us. Now, when we repeatedly prioritize these instant gratification giving apps over our long-term goals, something like a tug-of-war situation happens. where on one hand we have our phones, which give us instant gratification and a highly addictive dopamine rush. And on the other hand, we have our long-term goals, which require patience, consistency, and discipline. And what do we choose? Almost always our phones. Our priorities in life have just changed completely. And when we continuously do that, when we continually choose our phones over our long-term goals which require work, we come up with something called procrastination. We've all gone through it. Remember that time when you had an entire month to do that essay, but you ended up doing it the night before the deadline? Remember that time when you had an exam to prepare for, but instead you were on Instagram checking out what the Kardashians are up to these days? You procrastinated. Now, the exact science behind procrastination is incredibly complex, and I won't be getting into that. But in most cases, it's fueled by the fact that we're addicted to our devices, our phones, our iPads, our laptops, watching random YouTube cat videos, Netflix series, episode after episode, season after season, without realizing how much time we're wasting. Prime example. I've known that I have to do this TEDx talk for the past 3 weeks. And when did I start working on it? 4 days ago, on Saturday. Why? Because until then, I was busy watching season 9 of Friends on Netflix. I was constantly choosing instant gratification over something that was productive, something that required actual effort. Now, I've given you enough problems, and clearly we need solutions. Because our generation, a bunch of smart, talented, self-aware, hardworking, motivated individuals are constantly falling prey to this cycle of internet and instant gratification. So we need solutions. And I don't know whose fault it is. Maybe it's our parents who gave us unfettered, unlimited, and unsupervised access to the internet and smartphones. Maybe it's these devices which are just made to make money off of our addictions. Maybe it's us for not realizing how our smartphone addiction is affecting our mental health. But whoever's fault it is our generation's responsibility to find a solution. China came up with a solution. China set up 250 internet addiction treatment camps, which are basically a military-style boot camp where they help teenagers get free of their internet addiction. Looks something like this. Now, that's a bit too drastic for my liking. I'm not suggesting something as rigorous as military-style rehab. All I'm saying is that just recognizing this, just understanding the problem, realizing in the different ways in which smartphones can affect us is the first step towards making a positive change. Then spreading this awareness to your friends, your family, to people you care about. And the key thing is moderation. We need to be moderate about our usage of our phones. When you go out on the public transport, go out for a meal with your friends, on the dinner table, just keep your phones away. Just don't have them on you. You won't use them. And another very important thing, most of us keep our phones by our bedside, where something like this happens. At 12, we get a text, we see who it's from, and we spend the next 3 hours just texting all our friends. And then the next morning, we wake up looking like a zombie because we haven't had enough sleep. So don't keep your phone by your bedside. Keep it in the kitchen, keep it in the living room, keep it in the bathroom for all I care. Just don't keep them by your bedside. We need to understand that this is a serious, big problem. We need to free ourselves from this addiction of smartphones. That's the only way in which we can ever even hope of moving towards a better future. We need to free ourselves from the shackles of our smartphones. I'm sure we can, and I hope that we will. Thank you for listening.